Alright, what's up going on, people? Jared Punch are going to be in class. Well, that's alright. Don't need to conflict with whatever it is you're doing. You can listen later. It's not a big deal. But there are a lot of interesting details to talk about this chapter. Obviously, somewhat of information on Kirin's dragon attribute, which is really cool. As well as I would really like to see what exactly... what exactly is he going to look for Laxus in this fight? Like, is he going to be looking around even, or is he going to be looking kind of lower down? Because he's only really got, like, one more trick up his sleeve. He's only got his red Dragon Slayer mode, but it shows that he can hurt Kirin with that, but at the same time, Kirin obviously now is just starting to fight seriously, so we're gonna get to see him flex the next time we back to fight. This could easily be one of those times where Laxus gets, like, pretty much the next time we see him, he's borderline down. Like, he's just taking a lot of damage. He's getting worked. It's definitely seeming like the Black Dragon Slayer Knight type is living up to pretty much what Mishima has set them up to be, and the way more kind of like small grouping of them only being 4, and really we've seen the feats for 1, so we only need to have 3 of them really kind of build up to that hype, and it's going pretty strongly so far. Your kid doesn't even know he has. I don't know. I feel like it could just be from the same family, because granted, we just got Kirin, but we don't know anything about Gildarts' backstory. So say they're from the same family, and maybe Gildarts is from some very powerful bloodline, and, this could be Kirin Clive or something. Who knows? I mean, I could be reading into it, and it's literally just Laxus comparing his level of magical energy to Gildarts. But I feel like Mishima, who has already said that Gildarts will come into play at some point in 100 Years Quest, that he wouldn't just mention Gildarts for no reason. I think there's definitely something behind that there. But either way, Kirin's looking really hype. I really like just the idea now of his magic of this atmosphere dragon. So he's not doing any... He doesn't seem to have any, like, clad in, his attribute attacks. And Suzaku, I guess, is different as well, because he doesn't have a energy the same way. He's got the sword. We really haven't seen that much from the Dragoneers, to be perfectly honest, in terms of cladding themselves in their attribute. Kiria, I guess, yeah, because she makes the blades, and then somewhat Scullion, he becomes it, but, like, we don't have anything the same thing of them just having whatever the power is otherwise on their hands. I guess in a way, though, Suzaku sort of, because his power, I would assume, is partially tied to his sword. But Kirin just being able to affect the entire atmosphere around him is really neat. And I wonder what his range is and what his capabilities are. I was like, is he going to be able to, like, affect the weather? Could he, like, make lightning bolts, like, from clouds and stuff? Obviously, that'd be in Laxus' favor, but maybe he could use it in different kind of ways, like to use, like, wind, and maybe he could make acid rain or something. Something just to be really dangerous for Lax, because one of the things about the red lightning is it's also mercury fulminate, so it's like a chemical explosion on top of, lightning. So it does internal and external, like, variations of damage. One being just internal energy, and then the other one being a chemical explosion that is gonna bypass normal durability. On most cases, just based obviously it being a chemical explosion. I would assume it's like acid, really, that like chemicals and other forms of chemical weapons come into play. It's like radiation isn't the same thing as, like, being hit by a truck. But it's... I really wanted a radiation Dragon Slayer, but atmosphere is really cool, and I want to know how exactly he uses it. I would have loved to have a radiation Dragon Slayer. It's probably never going to happen, but I'm fine as long as, like, the Dragon Eaters are cool in, like, what their powers are. Because regardless of even the weaker ones, like Kiria, their attributes have been cool. I like Kiria's cool, like, hand blades, and she's just this kind of fast-moving, head-on assault sword Dragon Slayer. She reminds me of, like, Sarajevo's from Monster Hunter. I had a theory, actually, a while ago that Mishima was basing a lot of his designs from the Dragon Eaters off of creatures in Monster Hunter. I gotta go back into that now that we have multiple new members of the Dragon Eaters to see if my theory can actually hold up to it. Once we like see maybe some dragon forces, I feel like it will kind of like add a little bit onto that. But maybe after we see all of the dragon eaters like actually kind of like perform at least a little bit, we can kind of make an assessment. Because I do know that Mishima is a big Monster Hunter fan. He's a big player of that game. I think he plays pretty much every single one that comes out. Let me see. Let me read some of the comments. I'll just bump my mic. See what some people have to say about this one. Hard to see Laxus actually lose. I mean, right now, logically, Laxus versus Kirin, somebody who's on level with Suzaku. We've seen Suzaku and his feats. I think that Laxus can very logically lose a fight here. It's going to really depend on how he reacts to what's going on with Kirin. Because I feel like Kirin is going to just beat him. I want Laxus to lose. And especially with like what we've seen so far where characters being defeated in a fight doesn't mean that they're out of the game entirely. It just means that they're down temporarily. At least as of right now, I would assume. Because I don't think Natsu and Lucy are out of the game, and Scoleon and Madmal are both still conscious. So I would assume they could get back up and go back to competing in the whole labyrinth. So actually, I think that'd be really funny. Just like imagine the idea of like how annoying this could be. It's like a character who just keeps losing, but it's like they get up and eventually they find what they're looking for in the labyrinth. I guess in this case it's Elfsaria's heart, but you could have someone like Suzaku just lost, just has no idea where he's going, or just I feel like in general it's easy to get lost in a labyrinth, but someone who just gets fucked, who never even gets to fight. But there's no way that Suzaku's not going to get to fight. Mishima clearly likes Suzaku. I want to see Suzaku swing his sword and see if he cuts into the labyrinth. Because we know the labyrinth is extremely durable. And once characters start damaging the labyrinth, I think that's going to start getting really hype. Because obviously that where they're going to sit after that point is that means that their attacks are strong enough that they would heavily damage Dogromag. It's like their attacks are more powerful than Dogromag's durability. But let me see. Shiki's becoming the heroic demon king he was always meant to be. I like to think of him as like an anti-villain. He's like a good guy version of a bad guy. He's just this really nice bad guy. To a degree, I don't think he's out doing evil stuff, but obviously to the law that he is a bad guy. Kirin seems like a Gildart's opponent. I know a lot of people thought that too. I really want to know what Mishima has planned with putting all three of these Black Dragon Slayer Knights in this arc. I figured we would get them one at a time. Like, Suzaku's hurt, send in another one, send in two maybe. But it's like we have all four of them, and they're all ready to fight. So, I don't know if Mishima is going to bring in reinforcements. I did a video on that for both sides. But, I mean, you could easily have it for the Fairy Tail side. Like, she could just say Sting and Rogue because they're Dragon Slayers, Gildart's because he's the strongest person. Assumed in he's the strongest person in the guild in general. Natsu Dragon Force is obviously stronger than Gildart's, but Gildart's, from the standpoint of what the characters would say and what you would see most of the time in a battle, Gildart's is the strongest. And Jalal was offered to join the guild by Urza, so if Jalal joins, you can have someone like him to be in here and then start fighting. Because those are obviously characters that can fight with people up at this level, big like Spriggan level opponents, and then up. Even Madmal, Scoleon, and Kyria are still pretty strong. It's just that like they were going up against people way more powerful than like Laxus and then Urza, but obviously Kyria just kind of got the drop on Urza in the first round, and then she survived that one fire sword attack, but we know that she definitely would have lost in a serious fight at that point after the Laxus encounter. But they're still strong in comparison to a majority of characters. So it would really depend on who you bring over. And Jalal and Gildart's obviously, I mean, you can definitely say that. And then Sting and Rogue together are a very powerful unit as long as they fight as a duo. But it's really going to depend on what Mishima wants to do. This is already getting pretty crazy. Like the fact that he decided to have all this go on right now with Selene, as well as bring in all of the Black Dragon Slayer Knights, and then put Laxus versus Kirin as like the first matchup. Like he's going pretty wild, and I personally feel like this is gonna, like, Selene is gonna like run into a almost Tartarus or Sirius Island-esque arc. And what I mean by that is I won't get into the grand scale of it, but I mean in the structure that he's gonna keep having plot twists every short period of time, different things set up. Because with Sirius Island, one of the things about Sirius Island is that it just kept having twists and turns every single time you think something is starting to settle down. Every single time you think that you have a moment to breathe, something crazier happens. And Tartarus was that to a degree as well, but not just kind of like an escalation of craziness, more of like an escalation of things going wrong and things just kind of getting more and more hectic and chaotic instead. So I can see that happening here, because the difference between those arcs and this one is you had to be way more kind of like run along kind of like plots that build up into this. Like, there's still stuff going on obviously with this arc, but the difference is, like, you have to have events for certain characters to be at a certain location when certain events go off to kind of tie into the story. Whereas Selene can literally just grab somebody and bring him in and say, bam, you're in this now. Because we know that not only, obviously she's really powerful, she can teleport and go across dimensions and all that, but the thing about Laxus and Godjiel that we saw is they were teleported without even realizing what happened. Suddenly they were just there, so it's like an instantaneous thing. It's not like it's some slow envelopment. I thought that was a really good clarification on the speed at which like her teleport is when it actually goes off. It's a really good just kind of like telling of what it's like experience it from the standpoint of people that are as powerful as Godjiel and Laxus. So Selene can just bring people over, and I feel like with stuff like starting out with Kirin and Laxus, having stuff like this, like little thing about like Gildarts' magic in there. Obviously Selene's got her own stuff with like her kids in the back, whatever's going on with the whole negative legacy. What reason is Dogromag's body making this labyrinth? There's a lot of like question marks right now that are present, and this is only for the most part really kind of just getting started, because I feel like it's just going to be there's just going to be things kind of popping up like point by point. Because say if Kirin is related to Gildarts, that just pretty much guarantees Gildarts is going to come in, and then it's going to be like win, and then what is he going to do? How's this going to play out? How's this going to go? Because one thing logically, if you had a guy at like around Gildarts' age, just hypothetically, extremely powerful at his level obviously and stuff, but made him a Dragon Slayer, it would make sense also age-wise for Kirin to pretty much be in this position. But it'd also be a perfect point and place to give us Gildarts' backstory if it's through another character, kind of like bringing up events from the past and making them resurface. There's a lot of stuff that right now that I've had theories on. Obviously, the demise of Gildarts is one of them, and it's potentially looking like that. I mean, Kirin apparently carries his casket around to put people he kills in. Apparently, he's just like, he'll find like a strong opponent or something and then kill them and put him inside. I don't really know. And also, it's kind of funny that pretty much everything that Mishima so far has designed around the dragon, or not the dragon eaters, but specifically the Black Dragon Slayer Knights, he's like made their design so wildly different to whatever their Dragon Slayer attribute is. Like with Suzaku's, like, okay, it's a phoenix, maybe it's like some form of immortality or blood or healing or some regen kind of thing. It's like, no, he's just like this crazy hyper swordsman. And then you have Kirin, who's like this Jack the Ripper looking necromancer, but he's the atmosphere. Again, allegedly, I'm just gonna kind of like half kind of truth that, since we don't know for sure exactly the full description of what his dragon slaying title is. But I feel like at least right now, knowing what his magic does, we kind of can give it at least like a benchmark name and then get like an actual one later. Because it took a good minute for Suzaku's to be named. Even when we actually got him in the story, it was a couple chapters before we got Sword Saint Dragon Slaying Magic. Well, let me get back to some of these comments. Can you make a mod for my numerous successes? I don't know what you really did. Publicly defends Elders clapping Urza Guild Thunder. Those are all cap though. Are you saying you fought Quan when he was saying that? I'll think about it. When he beats Haku, I hope. I don't think so. I feel like Wendy... It's like, the thing right now is Haku and Haku's personality and what we know about Diablos and kind of where they exist as a enemy level. They're antagonists, they're not villains. And Haku has already shown that he's not aggressive. He's like a silly kind of, he's just a young boy. He just kind of wants to play and get stuff done and be praised and just do a good job. He seems way more like at what you would expect a kid his age to be like, but also he's very nice on top of that from what we've been shown. And Wendy's also really polite and really nice. It's going to be a really weird encounter. I'm kind of hoping for not a fight between them, at least not yet. I'm kind of hoping there's a friendly kind of confrontation between the two of them. Because one thing is, he can turn Wendy, like even if he turns Wendy into a plushie, Wendy should be able just to cancel it out. Wendy can fully null status effects. So unless there's some kind of weird aspect to his magic, I don't see Wendy having that much of a problem from that perspective of like what he can do. Granted, we don't really know entirely what Haku can do, but we at least know that Wendy should be able just to kind of nope that, because Natsu should be able to like burn the effect, but the problem is right now it's obviously fire to a plushie, it would burn it. So we got to figure out like how he's gonna get out of it. So unless Wendy does it, or there's some form of event that caused it, like I can see Wendy becoming friends with Haku and convincing him to undo it or something, or maybe like him revealing that he's done that, and then Wendy casts a enchant on him that cancels out any of his current like ones that are up, and then that kind of saves him. I can see something like that. That to me is a very logical conclusion to that mini plot line. It, like Natsu losing and Happy getting turned into plushies. Like that's one that we don't need to go for a long time, and I really would like to know if once characters are capable of fighting again, that if they're back in it and Celine counts them, because that obviously will determine like a big aspect of this whole game. Because I figured it was going to be like a single round elimination, you lose, you get teleported out. That just made sense to me, but Celine's kept them in, so I'm assuming that if you get downed in one way or another, once you're able to get back to your feet and keep going, you're counted. But I gotta wait to see exactly if that's gonna be the case. Don't see Wendy standing a chance against Haku without her inspired. Yeah, but you gotta keep in mind the personality of the characters, because you have to keep in mind the narrative and context of the story. These characters aren't just like, oh yeah, they meet across from each other and then kind of just run into each other like people catch you in Pokemon and want to battle you. It's more like they're gonna probably talk. We know Haku is friendly, and not only that, like they're around the same age. And I just have this feeling that Mishima is gonna kind of do a kind of like a mini like romance thing. Like maybe Haku develops a crush on Wendy. That just makes sense to me. Just to kind of like have like a little funny part right with there. Because that would build into something I think that would be more interesting for what's going on with their characters. But at the same time, I think it would make sense for them not to fight. And there would have to be something like weird to occur for them to kind of get in a fight. But at the same time, like Wendy should lose pretty handily to Haku. Whereas I feel like doing something like maybe like a little bit of a funnier kind of side plot going on right there, and maybe setting up a plot in for the future, probably has more value than some like short range moment between like ability kind of clash between these two characters. I could see maybe him turning Wendy into a plushie, but Wendy cancels it out, and maybe that's where they have really kind of a confrontation of the characters themselves and kind of like a back and forth. But it's just really going to depend on the next chapter, because Mishima ended with that. So I'm guessing we're going to see that at the very start. And also, it really tells me right now, at least so far, Mishima likes the Black Dragon Slayer Knights. Because the way that he's, like, how much attention he's given Haku already, and how much, like, he just has given him, like, a little bit of his own, very distinct personality between all of them, especially in Diablos in general, but also just bad guys in Fairy Tail in general. He doesn't come, like, not bad guy, but antagonist. He's an antagonist, but he doesn't in any way have any antagonist vibes about him. He's just kind of like, oh yeah, let me stop you as non-aggressively as humanly possible, and then just kind of continue onwards without a fight. Like, it's something that right now is pretty funny for his character, but at the same time, I want to know, like, once we get Masaki, I think Masaki is going to be the best kind of full indication of it. Because how much we've seen of Haku, how much we've already kind of like had for flex-wise for Kirin, as well as Mishima's obviously keeping him around, seem to be hyping him up and maybe connecting him to Guild Arts. It definitely seems like he's putting a lot of love and attention towards the Black Dragon Slayer Knights. Because the God Seeds were more of this part of Alderaan that was like a big raid boss that had overcome. The Moonlight Beauty Gods were strong, or I guess it's Moonlight Divinities in the officials. Moonlight Divinities were strong, but they weren't kind of like crazy big battles for the main cast. And again, I want to use Sirius Island as kind of like an example. Think of like the fights in Edalis for people like Grey, and then in Sirius Island. And then even though the fight with Nightwalker was intense, like think of like the gap between Nightwalker and Azuma for Ursa. Like there's big jumps in like escalation of events from those two arcs and like the heavy battles that everyone's going through. So I would assume that this is going to be like way bigger of a set of combat scenes for the main cast and pretty much everybody in it in this arc. Like this is going to be a really crazy one. I really want to see. I mentioned that the character I want to get the best spotlight out of the main cast is Gajil. Like, I want to see Natsu fight, because Natsu really hasn't had a fight since Alderaan. Granted, that was a really sick fight, but I would like to see him fight again. The one that I want the most to get, like, good feats, and definitely I'd say, like, I want Grey to get a new form, but, like, I also really want Gajil to get a new form. Like, they both deserve it. Gajil's is easy. Give him Dragon Force or give him something. No, just give him Dragon Force at this point. I was going to say something kind of like Fire Dragon King mode, but I mean, like, just give him Dragon Force or something unique to him. I actually really like the idea if Gajil was able to somehow maintain the, like, somehow kind of, like, learn the magic, I guess, actually, better to say, from Brandish, but specifically that one spell, just the enlarged spell, not the complexity of how to use that magic, but literally just make self big, put magic into spell, make self big, and have Gajil kind of buff off that. Like, imagine Gajil made his arm huge, but then condensed it, like used his manipulation of metal to kind of like maybe make this giant sized arm as big as his normal, but it's just completely like bound together, just crushed into itself to make it like way stronger. Something. I really want another form for Gajil, because he hasn't had a good fight the longest by far, because Mishima didn't even give us that much of a fight between him and Natsu. It was more of just kind of like a short skirmish and then a showing of where Gajil actually is comparative to Natsu. Gajil with Iron Shadow Dragon mode is equal to Natsu Lightning Flame Dragon mode, but that obviously isn't peak Natsu, whereas like that's as strong as we know Gajil can do on his own. So Gajil definitely needs one. I would love Grey to get an advancement of his Devil's Sling form. Grey doesn't even need to get a new form. I guess sort of. He just needs to have his Devil's Sling form advanced. Like, that's all you really need. Just kind of, like, give him a horn, give him maybe some, like, cool color alterations in his whole design, and then give Gajil Dragon Force. Or, like, I'll take something like a King mode for Gajil, but I'd prefer Dragon Force at this point in the story. But we'll see. It's going to depend on what Mishima wants to do. Like, Gajil definitely deserves it. Like, Natsu can do it at will. Wendy can do it at will. I mean, technically, Laxus can do it at will, but he, as far as we know, he only has the shitty Lacrima-based Dragon Force that's like a boost, but it's not that good. And he already has Lightning, or Red Lightning Dragon mode, so it's like, why would you want to waste your magic on a lesser form if you're like in a dire situation? What are people talking about? They're beating Laxus and Ursa. I think they're definitely going to beat Laxus. Don't see when. Wait, there's this one. Haku Silver Magic to Suzaku. Yep. I mean, that should be a fact. Horse Irene is popping up. I mean, at some point, yeah. Kirin is atmospheric magic. Can you use Kirin like Sasuke? I would assume so. If he can affect the atmosphere, he should be able to do it in just various ways. I think he's going to end up controlling the weather. And it just makes sense, like, with atmosphere manipulation. Otherwise, like, what is Mishima going to do with him? Is he just going to be making, like, air blasts or something? It's just one of those things, like, right now we're going to get to see him flex. And whenever we've gotten a face like this is the similar setup than what we got with Celine when Celine said she was going to flex. It's like this kind of close-up where we have this really cool color alteration at the top like that, this kind of, like, weird brush style. And then we're going to end up getting whatever his actual flex is. I'm guessing the weather. It's gonna be weird considering they're inside, but I don't really know what's gonna happen. I could see some form. Actually, hang on, I gotta sneeze. I could see like some big attack from Kirin, like destroy a big section of the labyrinth. So like, just imagine a big cavity where all of this like rock was, and then there's these big open doorways and pathways that are now exposed from their section of them being destroyed. And then you can have him kind of come out affecting the weather in there, and then attacking Laxus. It just kind of depends, because I don't really know. I'm trying to think of what he would do with weather manipulation besides use lightning, because obviously lightning is like a really good aspect. It's probably like one of the best offensive aspects of weather manipulation, but it's a bad idea to use it against Laxus for obvious reasons. So he could have other stuff like acid rain I mentioned, but even using ice, it's like Laxus, I don't know, if Laxus loses to Kirin's ice, it'd be like, well, then he would lose to Gray's ice, because though Kirin is stronger than Gray, I do not think Kirin would be able to specifically make ice colder than Gray's ice. It just makes sense to me. It could have more power behind it, but in terms of temperature, I think he'd be fine. But obviously, that's just speculation as of right now. Laxus, though, being in a bad spot, though, is really... It's really cool going into this arc, because Laxus is obviously really powerful, but this just kind of sets him in a very unique situation for his character. There was actually because it reminds me of like the Grand Magic games, because initially on the first day Mishima was going to have Jura battle Laxus instead of Jalal, and I assumed that Laxus was going to lose, and it was instead going to be a style of like Laxus loses on the first day, beats Jura on the last day. But I think because he obviously changed it, I think he's going to do that like here, where Laxus is going to lose, go down, and then later get back up and maybe have another fight. Or maybe Gildarts will show up. Who knows? There's a lot of weird stuff going on right now with the potential of the matchups. Because Kirin isn't some, like, random guy. Like, it's not like we have... Like, when we have, like, new guys show up, and it's like, okay, we have a general idea of where they should kind of be at, but not entirely. We don't know their powers, There's a bunch of blank slots in the details of whatever the characters are. But we know what type of magic Kirin is using for the most part. He's a Dragon Slayer. We know how Dragon Slayers fight. We know how they, like, how durable they are and their capabilities and whatnot. And on top of that, we know where he sits, like, obviously near Suzaku. So he has the advantage going into the fight. And I think that's something that Laxus hasn't really had since Hades. Because with Jura, with Tempesta, with Wall, we didn't really know entirely where Laxus was in comparison to them, but we knew that he was in range of being able to fight them, whereas like Jura was a little bit stronger than them at the time. Wall was just more kind of like was more difficult for him to fight just for how Wall fights, and then obviously Tempesta, without using his using his double particles, was defeated by Laxus rather handily. So going into this fight though, with Laxus being the underdog, is really cool, because it's nice to know that Fairy Tail doesn't have a character right now in direct power level wise that can just topple anybody in there. Because even Natsu with Dragon Force, I would assume it would take everything for Natsu to defeat one of these guys, just based off of the feats. So even in that case, it's like Natsu would only take out one. There's three more, and then like people like Urza, people like Gray, Gajil, Laxus, like they're obviously not as powerful as the Black Dragon Slayer Knights. The Black Dragon Slayer Knights are a way more formidable force in this than really. I'd say the Fairy Tail team in total, right now at least, obviously like there's going to be some increases in power, maybe like some characters using some new techniques, getting some new forms. There's going to be events in the story that play into the fights, but just going to the blank kind of like setup for them, I only see Natsu being able to 1v1 one of the Black Dragon Slayer Knights currently. Whereas like I don't know if Laxus is going to be able to. I don't see anybody else as of right now. And because when you think about it, like it's really a 4v 7. Sora's 5v7 because I think Scoleon is definitely a lot stronger than Madbull and Kyria, but he ended up fighting Laxus. Whereas, like, I think current Lucy or Wendy would be able to fight back against Kyria or Madbull just fine, and Scoleon obviously a bit more difficult. But obviously, the big threat in them is the Black Dragon Slayer Knights. I see Laxus versus Kirin being a mutual fight. I think Laxus is definitely going to be on the back foot a lot. Laxus was the first in Tartarus taken out. Yeah, but I think it's kind of like doing that, but a bit different in the way that he's going to be handled in this battle. Because he defeated Tempesta. Tempesta had a dirty trick where it's like, this is a straight fight. This is a not a I was able to lure you basically into a trap. This will be just be like, this character is more powerful by a wide margin. We'll start sweating. We saw Suzaku, so he's about to give Zoro Bankai with Enma. I mean, you give Zoro like 3 Enmas and he's still gonna get collapsed by Suzaku. He can't fight Suzaku at all. Huge argument over who's stronger, Weaken, Aldon, or Human Form Celine. I assume that they would be the same. I don't have any reason to think that they would be any different, because if their full power forms are the same, I would assume their weakened states are the same. Because otherwise, like, why would Celine even compare them if it's like there's that many different avenues between their strength? I think they're about the same. The same thing with Ignia. Like, it would just make sense that Ignia's human form is about the same strength as human form Celine, as well as Mercephobia. I feel like they would all logically be in these variations around the same level. Because it makes sense of why Alderaan would have a way to have a weakened form comparison to the other dragon gods who, though they have their full form that they can go into and have their full power, but while they're in this human form, they are weaker. So all of them have a state of being weaker. Alderaan's is just one that you have to kind of force him into, but Alderaan is obviously different because he didn't get as powerfully as the same way as the other ones. He kind of like cheated. Not cheated, he did it more in like a prep time kind of the way, and then his powers, like how you weaken him and how they are in power, work mechanically instead of like just being raw powerful. Huge argument. Wait, there is one. Merc and Plenty Uniform Celine. We can form Alderaan. No, he mentioned that Alderaan was weakened. The Alderaan that we saw at the end was much weaker, because every time one of his god seeds was defeated, like actually killed, Wolfen's was like weird because he didn't actually die. Whenever they die, that he loses a bit of magical power. His big body is just as powerful, but the smaller Alderaan is weaker. His level of magic is weaker. And you had to wait for him to regain his god seeds to return his full power, whereas Celine is just at her normal self. The only difference was Celine was in her human form at that point. I think it'd be ridiculous to say like Alderaan or Mercephobia, like going all out, even from what we saw, is weaker than human form Celine, because then why wouldn't Celine just go over there and clap them really quick? Because we know that she wants to defeat them. But she wants to defeat all the dragons. So it's like if she could take out 2 of them relatively easily, then she would have. I think it's... I personally think it's something to do with the translations, the fan translations. Because it's not that Mercephobia wasn't weakened. He just had no control over his mind. He essentially was just a rampaging monster. Because the White Witch was able to pretty much control the gauge of his power. That's why she cranked it all the way up. And then made him into, again, this mindless dragon. And Alderaan was weakened by his god seeds being destroyed. So he was actually weakened, but he was only weakened temporarily due to the mechanics of how his abilities all function, or they're all tied together. There's no way that Zora's... I don't think Zora's ever going to be able to beat Suzaku based off Suzaku feats. We'll see. I mean, but Suzaku also has Dragon Force up his sleeve on top of everything else. Base not to beat Dragon Force twins, yet Larky lost him. So you got to remember, Sting and Rogue, when they were in the Grand Magic games, were using their Dragon Lacrima based Dragon Force, which was much weaker. During the events that followed from Sting defeating Jienma during Grand Magic games, punching a hole through his chest, they mentioned he got more powerful because he was not you can be weaker for not fighting and like believing in what you actually kind of believe in. Like Sting was going more for like what the guild believed in from Genma and not what he actually kind of believed in, so it was dampening his magic because you can't lie to your magic. It's like the fact that it's tied to your emotions. It's like you're not putting your all into it subconsciously because of the back of your mind what's going on versus like what you're performing and what you're kind of like trying to do. It's like a weird thing with like how the power system of magic works. But what was I going to Sting and Rogue got stronger after that on top of that. Plus it had been a year plus, and Sting and Rogue are also stronger together. And definitely one thing about their Dragon Force, like the fused version, it's weird because it's not the same as a regular hybrid mode unless Sting and Rogue come back and they both can drop these like as a upgraded form, which I think they should be able to personally. It's like a unison raid on top of that because it is a Dragon Force, whereas what happened with Natsu and Gajil and even Future Rogue was a hybrid mode, where Sting and Rogue's it's like a unison raid hybrid mode. It's just really cool. A unison raid hybrid mode Dragon Force, pretty much. That's just the kind of like highlighted advantage that Sting and Rogue has. So it's just Sting and Rogue stronger later. On top of that, I feel like it's kind of obvious. Also, just real quick, I'd appreciate if people would thumbs up the stream, prefer the like button, and subscribe if you haven't. You don't have to give me any super chats or donations, but if you feel like throwing $1 my way, I would very much appreciate it. But again, you don't have to. It's all just it's all up to viewer discretion. Merc was referring to pre-unsealed Alderaan and all 5 god seeds, including Alderaan. He was just talking about Alderaan. Unsealed Alderaan with only 4 weakest god seeds defeated. He is most likely stronger than completely sealed Alderaan. I mean, completely sealed Alderaan is asleep. Face which erased magic and all fates which created a negative legacy. I really want to figure out what this negative legacy is. Kills all non-mages, makes wizards societies wanted. I mean, what if it's like the domain or the abyss of magic, and it's something that the magic people made in order to kind of like make themselves more powerful? Just one of those things that's like just associated will give you like a cheap boost, but obviously is dangerous. And maybe Hades is the ran into that at one point, and it has to do with like humans' dark side of magic, or I guess wizards rather. Here's like Kurapika bring a shovel to a fight to bury his victims. That is kind of true. I thought that's pretty cool. Actually, if Asta didn't get his attack off because the second gate Supreme Devil stopped him, and now Asta has to face him, that'd be really weird. Because wouldn't that just like, wouldn't pretty much everybody over in the Spade Kingdom just logically die from that point? Because like the Black Bull's base is gonna get crushed. All the random civilians and stuff on the ground are gonna get crushed by the gravity. They're probably gonna get overwhelmed. Because, like, if Asta doesn't do something right now, I think that it's going to be real bad. My guess is that Asta goes Devil Union. He pretty much puts all Devil Union power into one Mega Slash, and it cuts Lucifaro. And it's like, they push back Lucifaro. Lucifaro has to now wait for the official next gate. But in the process, he gave up Devil Union, and then the next Supreme Devil shows up. So it just completely takes Devil Union Asta out of this next fight entirely. I think that would be really cool. Because it'd be hype for Asta. It'd be one thing as Lucifaro. This isn't the real him. And it would just kind of like push him back. And this was just a teaser of him. Whereas taking Devil Union out of the fight for a while would be really cool. Because the fact that it only has a half-hour timer. And things are like continuously escalating as they are. The only thing I'd wonder is, like, what's going to happen to the Spade if, like if Lucifaro gets sent back. Like, this next, Supreme Dev would have to be, like, some scientist-like one that is, like, directly under Lucifaro, who just continues the ritual himself. There has to be something weird that happens. Otherwise, I don't really know what the plan is. Like, unless it's like the first and second gates are permanently now opened, and then like there's a break, and then eventually like another character is gonna try and open it, like open more gates. Other than that, like I don't really know what the plan could potentially be. Kirin is stronger than Guildarts. I could see that, but definitely gonna have to wait a little bit on his hype. How come Natsu could use fire underwater and training for Grand games? That was an anime scene. I would assume though with his magic, it's like he has to get a spark. Like I would just assume it's like he has to get a spark. Also, the scene itself is not canon; it's just an anime scene. But I assume he has to get a spark. If he could get off, he'd probably like evaporate the water around him and then kind of create an air pocket that would just keep his fire there. I think what Natsu is going to do after some of the feats in Hunter's Quest is he's going to be able just to kind of like heat up his body to do that and then make a pocket for air. Or just like his fire is just going to somehow burn water. Probably due to Merc's magic power in the water. I mean, I could see that, but I think it was just based off the mechanics of how the magic works. The fact that I'll see again also wasn't canon. When I said that Natsu had a breath of air during the training ground games, Merc arc, you just use a small flame. Oh no, that's just not canon. Don't know if this was already said, but you've seen the new micro chapter. Yeah, I thought it was okay. I thought the traitor reveal was kind of dumb. Natsu bullies Benimaru. I mean, he's just gonna eat his attacks and then just body him, and nothing Benimaru can do can hurt Natsu. Like to see Lucifaro be 10 feet tall. I'm hoping he's big. I'm hoping he's probably like 7 or 8 feet tall. I like that Sting can use White Shadow Dragon Force and Dragon Force at the same time. It's pretty metal. Yeah, it's pretty cool form. Laxus Dragon. Yes, the Sting or not Sting. Laxus and Cobra both use Dragon Force. Dragon Force is just an accelerated, temporary step in the Dragonification process. Obviously, 5th gen being different, but Laxus got scales as well as Cobra got scales, and his arms became dragon-like. It's just that 2nd gen and 3rd gen, like Lacrima-based Dragon Force specifically, is not as good. Because even if you look at the power boost that Sting got during the fight against Natsu and Gajil, the boost wasn't even relatively close to what he got in the fights between either Jalal or Zero. Because you look at like the gaps in Natsu's brute force in the fight with Jalal, or really where Natsu's sitting in his fight with Zero. Because keep in mind, Jura was more powerful than Minerva, Minerva, Sting, and Rogue. And Jalal, I'm messing with words. Jalal, obviously Wizard Stand level, Zero is stronger than him. Because Natsu also was in a higher level of Dragon Force during his fight with Zero. And Zero being a Balam Alliance Guildmaster, he's definitely in that kind of like upper Wizard Saint level. So Natsu being able to fight like on par and then defeat him puts that Dragon Force Natsu above like Sting and Rogue in the Grand Magic games. Granted, that's obviously not Natsu's base strength, or kind of like his own general strength because of the Flame Rebuke and stuff, but it really shows like the difference in like actual Dragon Force's boost versus like getting it from a Lacrima. It's just not the same thing. Brendan One Moves covers the whole planet. Okay. I think a superhero manga with villains is practiced to be an interesting series. I mean, I guess, but I guess at that point you're just watching a villain series. Laxus needs to lose for Diablo to be credible. I mean, they could tie and it'd be fine. I do not think Laxus is going to be able to beat Kirin though. It's too early for Kirin to go down, whereas like I could see Laxus losing early. If Laxus wants to win to be credible, he needs to whip out Fairylaw. I don't think Fairylaw is going to do anything. He needs to see them all like as enemies. He doesn't even know the other guys. Human Acnologia, the Hood Dragon with body Diablos. So Acnologia is just really powerful. When will my main Lucifugus come and finish Noct like he did with Morgan? Maybe he's next. It'd be cool if the negative legacy is similar to Endura. I'm kind of hoping it is some form of living weapon, like it's some form of being, like a new character of some kind. I really like the idea of them trying to kind of create an Acnologia, kind of like figuring out a way to forcefully power up a Dragon Slayer and just kind of build somebody on that. But it ended up being somebody extremely dangerous that they couldn't have. Like just around. Elvark was only good but ready for that. Wait, Elvark was good. I really like that. That's great, actually. I gotta go to Twitter. Quan is capping right now. But yeah, that's mostly it. Like, we didn't have a lot to talk about this chapter. I liked it. I think this is a really good setup chapter. It was, for the most part, like a short taste of Kirin's abilities. We didn't really see much of the other characters as well. Like, we only saw a little bit of, like, Natsu and Lucy's group. And then that last bit with, like, Haku and Wendy. So, for the most part, this chapter is Laxus's fight. And mostly Laxus fight. The other stuff is neat. One thing I actually wanted to mention, one small thing, is Leo. Leo uses his light and concentrates it down into like a heat beam, and it's able to set the little toy plushie on fire. Granted, it takes a minute, but it's like, I wonder if he can do that like regularly. Like if Lucy in her regular in her star dress her Leo star dress, if she could condense the energy beams down into a laser. Like, this is actually really really hype. I might do a video on that just based off of the fun that it could present. But outside of that, yeah, thanks for everybody for showing up. That definitely didn't have a lot to talk about in this chapter because it was mostly a fight chapter with some cool build up in there. But anyway, other than that, though, comment below, and I really hope you guys have a good rest of your weekend. Well, weekends, Tuesday. What am I talking about? Good rest of your week. And unfortunately, that does mean that it's 2 weeks until the next chapter. But the next chapter is also looking pretty hype. I'm hoping that if we get back to the Laxus fight, we get an absolute naming of what Kirin's dragon attribute is, or at least like a further display of his abilities to where we can kind of assess it. I'm fine with either, but like, I don't want to just go another week without getting anything from him. I would like to see something cool, like again him affecting the weather, and maybe he's like, oh, I'm a atmosphere dragons or atmospheric dragons or storm dragons or weather dragons or whatever he's gonna say, can do whatever. But yeah, other than that, below, thumbs up the video.